Hello, everyone. Here we are once again. We are now at week 5. And right now, I'll be talking about essentially the inception of the science of public administration all the way through the 1970s, which covers the reading that we just completed this week. And the question is this public administration for better or worse? Has public administration evolved into a better position to help out society as it was intended, or has it become something that is unfavorable to society? Here's what we'll cover today. We'll talk about where did the early theorists of public administration intend to go? What was it that they were trying to accomplish by creating these institutions? And then where were we in public administration by the 70s? I'll talk about some of the thoughts swirling around at that time period, and then I'll give you my personal take and references before we wrap up. Where it began, we had the property first approach coming from the English prototype, English common law, as Goodnow calls it, when the founding fathers, the framers, created this nation, the Constitution. It was all about property first, establishing rights in regards to property for the people. And then that was the shape government took. And then going on from there, things became a little bit more complicated. It became more complicated than just talking about property. We had environmental issues, military issues. Further down the line, we had the civil rights issues and whatnot. But going back to the 1800s, we had the Pendleton Act, which was the Civil Service Reform Bill. We learned that early on in this course, talking about creating a merit system rather than a spoil system within government to ensure the trust within government. Because as Woodrow Wilson stated, that we needed to have these bureaucratic institutions to carry out and implement the policy and legislation created by Congress. Because it was just becoming simply too big for Congress to take care of, so they had to delegate. Now we've landed in the 1960s up into the 1970s. We've had numerous wars, economic collapse, the most notable being World War I, World War II, the start of the Vietnam War, the last great economic collapse being the Great Recession. And that gave rise to the New Deal. It was deemed by society that laissez-faire type of institutionalism just simply wasn't working to serve society's needs. So we had the New Deal, the bureaucracy explosion of all of these public agencies, federal agencies designed to jumpstart the economy, and which created this sort of existentialism of bureaucracy as we had the close of the Great Recession in the 1940s, with also coinciding with World War II. Here we are in the 1970s, some years later, where we have a completely new set of issues facing the nation, but we still have these same bureaucratic institutions somehow still thriving and surviving. And some will say it will be. So here we are, for better or worse. Here's my personal take. We have agencies carrying out important functions. This was in accordance with Woodrow Wilson's idea of creating extensions of the legislature to carry out, execute the legislation and bills and policies passed by the Congress and Senate. At this point, agencies started to live beyond their necessary lifespan. We had the explosion of bureaucracy at the New Deal. Yet by the 1970s, the nation's issues have changed vastly since in those 40 years, 30 to 40 years since the New Deal's inception. So it created a question as to whether these institutions were necessary because the nation changed so much. Do we still need to have the FDIC? Can we do away with it? And brings up the idea of these agencies start to evolve, devolve, or adapt new functions. I put important on functions in parentheses because some would argue that no matter what, if an agency has served its product and completed its job, then we should just do away with it completely. And then some would say if we're already going to allocate money towards it anyways, we might as well have it do something in the service of people, even if it is something than it was originally intended for. It creates a constitutional question. Since we have agencies delegated power by Congress, and now these agencies are taking on, stretching out beyond what they were originally delegated to do, taking on more power and making more rules beyond what it was intended to do. And then these agencies could also evolve. A modern day example, will be to go into the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. We had the 9/11 happened, and then we also had the Great Debacle with Hurricane Katrina's response. So it created this sort of merge between these agencies under one single umbrella as they evolved into, as it was intended to become more efficient and better communicating, although some would argue it's become just as convoluted as ever. And then also agencies have the option to devolve. They can go from a federal to a state institution. The framers may say that this is a good thing as it gives states more power, more say in the matters, but given the state of funding, federal funding, grants coming from, and the oversight coming from centralized federal power over the state, it truly blurs the line as to what is a state agency, what is a federal agency, as it's so interconnected. And this is what Gladstone was really getting at, as bureaucracy has become so complex. Are we creating a monster that we may not be able to control down the line when we need to and rein in? So at this point in the 1970s, bureaucracy has grown to such an extent it's really raising questions, especially during the time of the Vietnam War, when skepticism of the government was probably at an all-time high. It's raising the question as whether we should start implementing checks on these bureaucratic institutions. Have we let them run away too long with too much power and rulemaking ability? So that's all I have. Here are some references for some nighttime reading. And then that's a guys for this week. That's all I have. Can't wait to see your guys' presentation next week.